Hello and welcome again. This one, I think this one's kind of obvious, but sometimes not so obvious. And welcome to my channel. My name is Jose. I do a bunch of things, a lot of different things. Well, not a lot, but kind of. I do music, astrologies, as you can see from this video. Um, did I say music? Okay. And also other forms of divination. I'm new to divination, like well, astrology is divination. Other things like runes, tarot cards, oracle cards. I've also tried hydromancy. That one's a fun one. I only made one video of it, but I've been kind of practicing it, not recording it. Um, you'll see what it looks like. But there is a video on my list of what is this, if you go to this channel itself, you'll see hydromancy as an actual folder. But the one thing I wanted to talk about today is the idea of um, as you get better with astrology, don't forget that it's a form of healing as well. Okay. That means you got to do the work also for yourself. So heal as you go along with this, improve on this. As you get better with astrology, as you do better readings for yourself, starting with yourself and then for others. Because what it does, it kind of, I know that it's usually kind of more like a knowledge thing, and you kind of say, okay, well, for some people, it might be a form of like confirmation that I went through this and all this stuff. But there is a way to go about it, where if you learn about specific areas of astrology, like, for example, the big one is people go right away into like specific houses, like where they could do like healing. Like, for example, the sixth house would be the house of the unconscious, opposite of the 12th house. I'll show it to you right now. So I'll go to the website, go to my chart, and just with the basic chart, you'll see. Hopefully you can see it. Okay, so wait a second. I'll delete all these ones. We don't need that one right now. Okay, that was for me earlier. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to astro.com as usual to see the chart itself, right? So yeah, I had Verona left over. Let's leave it. Let's leave it there. Okay, so if you look at the placements, if you look at what it looks like a wheel, right? For those who are new to this looks like a wheel, right? And you're probably wondering, well, there's like these, it looks like a piece of like pie, right? And there's pieces of it, right? It's like, when you go to class and you learn in math, you have like fractions and all that stuff. Well, in astrology, it's not really the same. Um, but you see how there's like, if you actually put an angle to this, if you say, you see how like, let's say below this one, and you see the two there, and then you see the eight, and then you see the seven. You see how the line there is actually the same as the other one here? That's because those are cusps. So the cusp of the second house, by the way, cusp is at the beginning of each house. So these are houses. So when you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, those are cusp of the houses. So at the beginning of those, not after. Okay. And the cusps only apply to, let me make this straightforward and direct, houses only. It does not apply to, you can say probably, oh, cusp with this sign, all that stuff. You can sort of say that, meaning like the cusp of the beginning. But typically they only apply to the houses. Not to be rigid, but it makes more sense that way. There's a reason for order. There's a reason for structure and all that stuff. And this is one of those things because it makes the readings much clearer if you have a way to kind of follow through something, like follow if you have something to follow. So uh so the reason I'm mentioning the houses is because if you look at the houses, they're kind of opposite of each other, right? But then you also see sometimes you have these lines. You see like this Chiron. This is Chiron right here at the very top. And you go to the bottom, you see that it's kind of like you see the red line right there. That's opposite of my Mercury Uranus conjunction. So that aspect right there, oppositions, Every time you have something opposing each other, that's actually tied to shadow. Every time there's something you're trying to balance and integrate and put together, that is shadow. And because if you think about shadow work, I mean, there's an aspect of yourself when you're pointing a finger at someone, right? If you're going like, you did this and I did that, but you're just owning it part of yourself. Many people are afraid to go into shadow work because they feel like they might find the truth about themselves. They go deep and they go deep and they go deep. But that's not really the case because the more you find more about yourself and the disowned parts of yourself, which happened when you were children, in order to fulfill the desires of other people because we wanted to be feel safe, we wanted to belong, we didn't want to be, kicked out the house and left to die in the streets and all that stuff. A lot of times so that's what happens when you're a child. We don't know how else to cope, right? Many of us, most humans, a lot of humans, not today it's changing in generations, but it is that exact thing that creates the shadow. It's a part of ourselves that we refuse to accept. So it's a disowned, many people, if you go to shadow work, Teal Swan is a big one. One of the people that I've gone through, or the teachers that I've gone through, is Debbie Ford. Rest in peace. She passed away years ago, more than a decade ago, but I started with her. And a lot of people are going to shadow stuff. So it's really embracing that part of yourself, the gift that you see in others instead of blaming and pointing and finger pointing and projecting onto them. You embrace that as part of yourself. It's a long story, but the shadow work is exactly that. But going into deeper shadow work can be done through astrology. Yes, it can be done through astrology. So usually how that works first is if, yes, you have oppositional aspects. Okay. It just means that the planet aspects are basically how planets behave with one another. In other words, the planets, if you make this sort of simple, the planets are fragmented parts of um, everyone. In other words, the universe. I'm not really making sense right now. It's fragmentation. So there's a part of yourself that is the ego self. There's the emotional self, the moon, for example, the wounded self, the victim self, or the love relationship self, the horny self, the fantastic self, the imaginary self, the creative self. There's always aspects of ourselves that's in the charts. It's going to show up, whether it's just the actual planets themselves or the combination of that. Either way, it's fragmentation. It is part of being human, like, or rather living in this fragmented world, which is third dimension. So whenever we look at oppositions in the charts, anything that's actually even opposite, not necessarily aspects, we will see something. So for example, if you look at the angles, ascendant, descent, that's the name of the rock band, hard rock. Is it hard rock? Whatever. Classic rock. AC/DC, right? So that represents AC/DC, meaning like your relationship with others and your relationship with yourself. So um the sun often represents what energy we grew up with and what we rejected. So therefore we tend to attract that because we rejected it. It's kind of like saying if you bury things down in deep into the water, what happens? It's bound to surface, right? That's because you're just hiding it. You're not really accepting it as part of existence itself. So what happens is exactly that. Shadow comes in, and therefore you we tend to attract people. So in my case, for example, my descendant was in Capricorn. And when I say was, notice I said was because this was a time of birth. Simple as that. Descendant was in Capricorn. So that means that I grew up in a family where it's very, opposite of Cancer. It's like very unemotional, lack of connection, emotional connection, security, emotional security. And so what happened was I tended to attract a lot of people who were very much like that. A lot of them were earth signs, which still applies to Capricorn. A lot of them were also very like, just to a certain degree, very like, what is a domineering? Okay. So I didn't like that. So what happened was I started to identify with, and that's the first house, which is represented by the ascendant. Okay. And so I wanted to show people that I'm not so much wanted to show people, it's almost like a natural subconscious reaction. And it's funny because if you look at it, the 12th house is house also a subconscious house. Sorry, I'm itchy right now. Um, and so what that means is that as the subconscious rises into the first house, this is exactly where identification starts to happen. We start to identify with the ascendant and saying, this is how I package myself to the world. This is my mask. So you cover yourself up saying, I'm hiding this to the world. So this is the shadow saying, I want to be that kind of emotionally, what do you call that? Very nurturing kind of person who's very giving and very, family oriented and all that stuff. That, family is important, right? So that's how I subconsciously portrayed myself to the world, unbeknownst to my young self, that I was still attracting actually the opposite. So I needed to bridge the two, that I need to embrace that Capricorn energy, that archetype of Capricorn, which is, you know, disciplined, um, being consistent, being grounded, um, having a specific foundation, being more objective. Okay, those kind of things. So I had to learn that. And then I started attracting less and less and less those kind of people. That's an example of the healing that goes through. But it takes more than just that. Um, let's go to one planet that usually is a lot to do with wounding healing, and that's Chiron. My Chiron was in retrograde in Taurus in the 10th house. So Chiron is often the wounded healer. So what that means is in order for us to actually, not even in order, there's no goal. What tends to happen is the part of us that is actually, with the parts of us that we heal, we start to heal. We start to see in others, and therefore we start to heal them as well because we've solved it in ourselves, right? So, for example, it's like, if think of it like that water, the pitcher water, again, as an analogy. If you don't heal that, if you don't clean the dirt and gunk underneath that pitcher, how are you supposed to use it to help others? You're just passing on poison if you haven't cleaned the jug, and you're just pouring water and giving it to others, pouring water, giving it to others, pouring water, giving it to others, which as a result, you're passing on poison. So if you are unhealed, you're passing on things energetically, at least, to others. Hurt people, hurt people. This is Chiron. So whenever you have Chiron in your chart, whatever sign it's in shows at least the general part of what that is, how that is expressed. So for me, it is several things. So Chiron, so there's no definite way of putting this where you think, oh, for example, if you have Chiron in Taurus, the books tend to always separate Chiron in the signs, and then the next day they go Chiron in the houses. They don't really show the combination of both. But I'm here to show you, you have to combine both, okay, and more. The Chiron in retrograde, by the way, yes, this is a video also showing that you have to look at the whole picture instead of just going bit by bit by bit by bit, just parts of it missing. You need to look at the planet itself, how it behaves, what it's about. Is it in retrograde? What sign it's in? Is that sign, what element is that sign in? That what quality it has, and if it's a polarity, if it's negative or positive, meaning inward behavior, which is like introspective, and outward perception, extrospective. Is that the word for that? But you get what I'm saying, like introverted, extroversion, introversion. Okay. So Chiron, and then what house it's in, and also the aspects to it. Okay. So let's start with this, for example. I'll show you what I mean. So Chiron retrograde is meaning it retrograde often means several things. One, it's an insecurity, it's an uncertainty. But if you think about the symbolism, again, we talked about symbolism and how it feels. If something pulls back, it feels like, you think of it as like a machine that doesn't really function well, and then you see, like, let's say a boiler, it goes, and it's just like it's loud because there's something stuck, right? That's exactly what it is. So it feels like it's repeating itself, like a broken record. Basically, a broken record will continue to play itself in the same exact spot because it's stuck. because it's broken. So that's what happens with retrograde. It doesn't mean that it's broken. It means that there's something, an attention that needs to be placed on that specific wound. Being in Taurus here means that it was about self-worth, it was about values, self-esteem, also possessions. When I was 16, it's funny because the word 16 here. When I was 16, literally around that age, I was supposed to go to a concert, and that's when I think I shared it before. One of my oboe that was like beautiful. It was just like my dad got it for me. It was still under rental, but it was like perfect way to start. It was like, oh, it had everything in it. It was just like, it wasn't a student model. It was just like, oh, perfect start. And someone stole it because someone pawned it off. I believe it was my locker buddy at that time. But the point was that it did happen, and that shows it in chart as well. Not to say that 16 is significant with Chiron, but it could be. I'm not sure about the numbers yet. When you see 16 degrees, right? 16 degrees, 47 minutes. Don't worry about that number right now. Fine. The point is, the fact is that it did happen. It continues to happen even to this day. Where there's well, not really. There's a thing about Chiron in Taurus because its reputation, um, because of the 10th house, its reputation, a lot of it is like my self-worth and reputation. Yes, I used to be worried so much about that. Now I'm just more like how I've evolved is like, nah, I don't care. Right? There's a bit less of the anxiety or the belief of that belief system of I have to worry about whether the people think. No. Okay. So that's a simple one. How I go further into it is that what makes it even stronger is the fact that it is in Taurus, and Taurus is a fixed sign. It's much harder. I mean harder. What I mean is like it's not a belief of mine. It shows when you read for someone, when you see it in something like a Taurus or a fixed sign, it means it's going to be like slow. The progress will be slow. The healing will be slow. And yes, it was. It's also an introspective sign, or it's like a negative sign. Okay, negative means like introspection. It's introverted sign. It's green, so water and earth are introspective. It means that a lot of the stuff I did I had to process it inwards. I had to go inwards, literally inwards regarding self-worth. Also, beauty was part of that. Looking good in front of people, that's Taurus, right? Health was also part of that, meaning like food, what I eat, that's Taurus. Having boundaries, that's Taurus. So you see how the woundedness applies to that, right? So well, as I say it now, is exactly what happened. Okay. Um, let's see here. And it is, so that's the polarity and fixed sign. Okay. And the element, the fact that it was Earth, I also had um concerned about wounding with anything that's Earth and natural. I was very much away from I lived in the cities. I often lived away from natural soil from the earth. So I had wounding tied to trusting the land, trusting Mother Gaia, trusting, is it bacteria in it kind of thing. I used to have more of that stuff. Now it's like I worry less about it. I'm just like, so it's about cleanliness as well. Specifically it's tying to directly to um, handling natural objects. Okay. Plants. Okay. My health as well when it comes to specifically um, eating naturally. So I had to switch to that. I became vegetarian and then I became vegan. Okay. That's tied to that as well. So there's a lot you can get from just that placement itself. Now, tying it to the aspects, for example, there's a lot, right? You see the lines there, I tend to look at square aspects first because they keep us awake. They're the ones that show us that it's like, you know, that it's about well, you remain conscious. It keeps you awake because you're not like unconscious. When I say unconscious, I mean not just like oh, I mean literally the decisions we make, the choices we make when it comes to awareness and what consciousness. So, it says a bunch of words, but the point is you get the point, right? So it keeps us awake. Square aspects are very beautiful because they make us strong. They help us to be in the present moment. It's like, okay, what are my beliefs behind all the stuff I'm doing? Why am I still suffering? Because we have a belief behind it. And I'm just really going by what Bashar says, but it's all basically the same thing. So with square to my nodes, my Chiron is square to my nodes, it's showing that I have a block with my soul path, meaning that I can't necessarily, when I become technical to people, when I relate with people, this is my South Node is in the seventh house, it's in Aquarius, it doesn't get recognized. It didn't get recognized. There was a square to that. So if we were to break this down, first there was that. I had all these gifts about being technical. I understood I understood things. I had trouble with math as well, or rather, so any sort of agreements that I had, any sort of job specifically, this is the 10th house, jobs that I had, if it I had wounding and trying to also succumb to the desires of the world and not being my natural self. That's also Taurus. But that's also with Aquarius, being your individual self. So I couldn't really be my individual self as long as I carried this wounding of like poor me, victim me. I lost this, I've lost that. Okay? So I hope that helps. And at the same time, I couldn't really move forward into shining because I was always just being pulled by this wounding. Now we also have another part here where the nodes are actually have a square aspect to Mercury, Uranus. So if you already know Mercury, it's mind, communication, thought, perspective, all that stuff. Um, and then Uranus, add to that, Uranus is a high vibration of Mercury, which means it's more than the mind. It's like higher intelligence. It is evolution or revolution, rather. It's changes. It's breaking apart things that no longer work for us. It's in Scorpio. If you just look at the opposite side of that, the opposition, Chiron to Scorpio, or Chiron to Mercury, I had to fix the way I was thinking. I had to change my mindset. I had to elevate. I had to change the way I was behaving. This like specifically with myself and my family, or blood related family, or any family environment, any private environment. That's the fourth house. But the fourth house also represents DNA. My DNA has started to change once I started to embrace my own inner power. And then I realized I had to balance that the losses were not actually losses, but gifts, so that I can be more conscious and make more conscious decisions when it came to how I shown to others, how I appeared, how I become more my authentic self. My thoughts had to change, and then I had to really shift that through a lot of shadow work. This is Scorpio as well, it's tied to shadow work. So this is what you call a grand fixed square. Had to show me a lot of changes that I had to make slowly because they're all in fixed signs in order for me to be myself, shine, and also help others know what contracts I get into, any agreements that I have with business or people that I work for, or just my reputation alone. There's one little thing that I didn't mention here is that if we looked at this from a medical perspective, meaning medical astrology, this is where the whole thing appears with the whole balance thing. I have Meniere's disease. I was diagnosed with Meniere's. Taurus is stability, grounding, right? But because there was uncertainty with the wounding behind that, that also came with imbalance. But Chiron also, it rules health, right? Immune system. So if main immune system was affected, it also affected my ears. How is it when you look at the doctor? Ears, nose, and throat. So I tended to have issues, okay, with that. And the perception that I had, or the memories that I had, that's also the mind tied to Uranus right here. I had deep-seated wounding, deep-seated like anger and rage. So if I didn't work on that, what would have happened is that I would have gotten worse I would have had a worse Meniere's condition, right? But I was forced to wake up. I was forced to wake up. The Black Path was saying, you got to work on that. You got to heal your relationships, myself, relationship to the world, how I saw it, how I perceived the world, and how I perceived myself, my my inner self, my this is the fourth house, my heritage, my specific, universal DNA. Let's call it that. It's beyond than just typical heritage, family, DNA, ancestry, all that stuff. So in turn, I started to heal. I started changing my diet. I wasn't concerned about, I was less concerned about trying to win or win everyone's approval or, find, I don't know, validation, external validation. Sorry, the healing. Okay. Uh, let's see here. So there are still lots to go through. So that's a quick example. Or was it really quick? That's a deep kind of example from my chart on how you can look at where it is. So wounding can come through the opposition. Just to summarize, wounding can come from when you look at the shadow work through any opposing planets, any oppositions, the angles, anything that's close to the cusp of the houses themselves, how they work together. If you have planets in one house and it's opposite of the other house, how they work together. And it's usually shown by aspects, oppositional aspect. Chiron itself is one of them. But you can also find it also in just just in one specific planet. If you look at from an evolutionary point of view, what is it that's bringing, what are you here to learn with this? For example, if you have, like, say, a planet by itself, look at what it's called, singleton planet, what happens is that you might be like, well, how does that help me with healing? It's like, well, there's healing everywhere. There's really healing everywhere in the charts. But the point is that I'm making is that as you go through your chart, you should also, not should, but it would help that you also heal yourself so that you also understand how to heal others, right? So this is my little spiel for today. I hope that helps. It went longer than I expected, but that's fine. I hope that helps you. Um, yeah, I just wanted to share that. I felt like sharing that. Um, leave any comments down below. Again, I will not, what do you call this? Absorb or listen to anything that's a negative feedback, which I'm sure there isn't because I'm just letting you know. But any comments are welcome. You're welcome to say whatever you want. Whatever comments you want to put in, and also like and subscribe. And I think that's it for today. Thank you for bearing with me. And what is this? Last 20 something minutes? I don't know. Oh no, there wasn't even more. No, okay. Yeah, maybe 20 minutes. Thank you guys. Talking a lot today. Bye.